Hello, I'm James Perkins, Junior Mayor of the City of Selma and the chairman of the Courageous Free Thinkers Forum that is put on annually by the Selma Dallas County Friends of the National Historic Trail. I'm also pastor of the Ebenezer Missionary Baptist Church, the traditional site where these forums have taken place. Tonight, I'm really excited about this virtual experience. What we are about to embark upon, this conversation, is one that is hot in the media today. It is hot nationally. We're going to deal with January 6th, the consequence of the Black vote. And that's a question mark. We want to probe into and address this whole issue as to whether January 6th was motivated, was it perpetuated by the consequence of the Black vote? And so I am excited this evening, not going to take any more time. I want to present to us this evening a stellar citizen of Selma, an immaculate educator, one whom I love personally and both professionally for the contributions she makes both in society and in my family. I want to present to you Ms. Candace Pettaway, great educator and the moderator for this forum. And let's just sit back and enjoy, because those panelists that she will be introducing are ground zero individuals who know something both spiritually, functionally, and professionally about this topic. And so, Candace, it's all yours.
Good evening, everyone. Great evening. Great evening. We apologize for having technical difficulties, but we'll come back to that. As you see, we initially were playing a video of January 6th so that you can get a recap of what happened, but we ran into a technical issue in playing the video, which is interesting because I play a lot of videos from YouTube, never had that issue, but that particular one, there's all of a sudden a copyright issue. So we're going to proceed with this forum and discussion. Tonight we have some stellar, and when I say stellar, I do mean stellar panelists who will share their expertise, their view, and simply their passion behind what happened on January 6th. We have tonight State Representative for Alabama House District 67, Prince Chestnut. We also have Dr. May Taylor Richmond, a foot soldier and a citizen of Selma, Alabama, very active in the Selmont community. We have Alan Reese, the CEO of the F.D. Reese Foundation. We also have the Honorable Cheyenne Webb Christberg, civil rights activist, author. She has an amazing children's book. I do advise you to buy it for your children. Um, and we also who will join us, a student of the Selma High School in Selma, Alabama, Antoine Hasbury, who will join us shortly. So let's get into it. Although we couldn't watch our video, I do want to just kind of start off with this thought. January 6th, that's our topic, right? January 6th. When you hear January 6th, 2021, what is your reaction? I want to start off with Representative Chestnut. What is your reaction? January 6th, 2021, what is your reaction?
Well, my reaction is my first gut response is that this is essentially a last stand. It is what I saw were a group of people who believed that they had a divine purpose to overthrow the government, to deliver the presidency back into the hands of Donald Trump, and they were willing to go through any means to do that, and that they call themselves patriots and other euphemistic terms to attempt to convey that they are somehow more connected or that America is more theirs than anyone else's. And I think there was a level of really delusion there on many of those folks' part. But I believe that there were also others who were there who weren't necessarily as aggressive and as delusional, but when they saw others encroaching upon the Capitol, advancing into the Capitol, uh, it became a thing where if I see others doing it, then maybe I can get away with it too. So I just really, it's very unfortunate because if it comes out, if the investigation shows that there were others, they're members of Congress, and if possibly that there might have been someone in the White House that would have been encouraging this, then I really think it's a very sad day for our country, and it will live in infamy. Thank you.
Dr. Richmond, I want to hear your reaction. And then after you speak, Alan, and then we'll go to Miss Kreisberg. I was about to say Miss Cheyenne, Miss Kreisberg.
Once again, it reminded me of the struggle that we had down through the years. Can you hear me? It reminds me of the struggle for the 1965 movement, why we voted for the right to vote. That particular day, on January the 6th, that day it was, once again, it was a disgrace. It was a cowardly disgrace of power to be able to control. And it appeared that it was something that had been premeditated. Um, the struggle, and people who do not have the value of other people around. Once again, it goes back to, it reminds me of the civil rights movement and all the struggles that we encountered, to see people who, in the supposedly free country, attack other people simply because they wanted to have the right to equality and the right to justice. So once again, it's a struggle for power that is entitled to everyone, but others not want everyone to have that power.
Dr. Richmond, we caught a little static, so I'm just going to quickly recap what I heard you say. I heard you say that it reminds you of the civil rights movement, and it looked to you as though it was a struggle of power, and
Voting.
those who were fighting because they feel like they were losing their power, and that because they didn't want a certain group of people to have that power or to share power with this group of people. Is that correct? All right,
That's
wonderful.
correct. And by
Okay,
um, attempting to get that pound, that's correct.
gotcha. All right, Alan, we're on to you.
Oh well, when I saw that, I was sitting in my room, and I saw two parts of that. I saw the rebellious generation, the offsprings of the Confederacy, the generation when I can't get my way, I want to overthrow the government. I'm gonna take by force because, like um, Representative Chestnut said, I feel like I'm more important than the other people, the other citizens. So I saw that the children of the Confederacy. But then I also, as a young black man, I saw it took me back to, when in the summertime we was marching for Black Lives Matter, and I saw how the government was more prepared and we were more peaceful. But I saw a government that tend to, say, well, they pretty much look like us, so they're not gonna do anything. They're not a threat, and they wasn't as prepared. You can say it was on purpose or it was by mistake, but the point is that white America tends to get um, the benefit of the doubt when they are acting as extremists or people of no control. And I just saw that when I looked at the TV, I was like, it's just a disgrace. How can you tell me as a black man that I'm equal when things arise? This is how you act, and this is how you get treated by the government. But when I'm peaceful and I walk in peace, or I'm nonviolent, I'm getting tear gas and beat and um, just guns, getting killed, your knee on my neck. I just don't understand. So that's what I saw.
Miss Cheyenne, on to you. Unmute your microphone, Miss Cheyenne. See if you can unmute.
When I saw what happened on January 6th, I was very troubled.
All right, what we'll do, we'll come back, Miss Cheyenne. I noticed you're having just some slight delay in your connection, because I do want to hear what you were saying. So we'll come back to you. What I do want to go back to while we wait for Miss Cheyenne to get her connection together, we're going to have a little conversation, because I heard some powerful things. What I heard was, Representative Chestnut, you used a phrase. You said you suspected that there was a level of delusion, right? And I kind of want to go back to that. If you will, kind of elaborate on why and what you were referring to when you say you observed a level of delusion within the crowd, within the way of thinking, within the response, within the crowd. Kind of go back to that when you say you observed a level of delusion within the crowd.
Back, but I want to try to explain what I mean by that. When I say a level of delusion, what I'm referring to is that there are people who were so enraptured and captivated by the fact that they had a person in office that spoke to them on every level, every aspirational level, wealthy, aggressive, says whatever is on his mind, only sees people like him as important and others as less than. And many of those folks that you saw at the Capitol that day, it's like him being removed from office. It's almost like their dream being snatched away from them. And so, because many of them are probably not used to things not going their way from a global perspective, such as other folks are, like indigenous people, Native Americans, African Americans, and those of us who are minorities in this country.
Let me ask you a question. When you say many of them, let's be real transparent, because see, I think it's also time that we really had this conversation. So I'm happy we're having it. Who are them? Who's the them that we're referring to?
Them. That's gonna be the those who call themselves patriots, those who wear the jackets that say "Don't tread on me," those who believe that they should be able to carry a rocket launcher if they want to, or any type of military hardware to kill another human being. Those who believe that kids should take Uzis to preschool. You know, I know that sounds a little outlandish, but I wouldn't be surprised if there would be those who would support something that outlandish. But we're talking about folks who would tend to be a lower socioeconomic, white, Southern, and Midwestern males that felt that they were being disenfranchised somehow because the man that they idolized, and in fact, some even, I think, worship, lost an election. And he was telling them that he did not, in fact, lose the election, that he won the election. And so that's where the delusion kicks in, because now they're believing that no, if he said he did not lose, he didn't lose. And he's called us to the state capitol, to the national capital. And he's asking us to make one last stand on behalf of him. And if we do this, we can take back our country. Now, exactly what take back your country means, you know, for me, when I hear those words, that phrase, I'm thinking take us back to what, pre-1960s? Where are we going with that? Because I don't remember those awesome, wonderful days. My parents don't remember those days as being so great and so wonderful that we should go back to them. I think that we're living in a time where we have opportunities that we never had before. And I'm one of those folks who thinks that as a country, we're moving in a direction where we're breaking some of the chains and we're getting opportunities. And you don't have to be born a certain color. You don't have to be born with certain parents now in order to go somewhere in life. And I think that that's a good thing.
I want to go back and address a couple of things that you stated that tie into some things that Alan stated. But before we do that, Antoine has joined us. Antoine, I want you briefly to just tell us January 6th, and your question is going to be a little different. Where were you? What were you doing? And then I want to know, what is your reaction to the slate of events that happened on January 6th?
Hello.
We hear you. We're waiting on you. We hear you loud and clear.
Okay, so you're referring to January 6th when they stormed the Capitol?
Yes. So think about, where were you? What were you doing when that happened? And where were you? And what went through your mind once you realized, or even did you watch it live? What was going through your mind when you saw what occurred at the United States Capitol as a high school student in Selma, Alabama? What was going through your mind?
So let me be honest. So at first, I wasn't aware, until um, my friend, my peers, and then I turned on the TV, and I seen them, storm the Capitol, and my first, thought, and like, why are they storming? And coming for the Capitol, people were jumping, from the building, jumping on top of the building, breaking the White House, and I'm like, wow, why that? And so, it was just shocking to me that they even, got into the White House, because, they had security, but it was a lot of people out there. So I was pretty shocked.
Let me ask you a question. When you say you were not aware, when did you become aware? Was it the same day? Was it the next day? Was it were you on social media, or when you say your friend told you, how long, like what was the time gap, if you could just kind of think back on when you actually found out about what happened?
It wasn't too long from when it got posted on the news, and then I started going down social media, so I'm Twitter, Facebook. People are talking about it, so I'm like, what's going on? Because I had no idea what was going on at the time, so I'm looking through the blogs and on Facebook, and they're like, they're storming the Capitol, and I'm like, why they're storming the Capitol? The election and everything was going on. They was some of them was pretty mad, that the that Biden, how it was winning the election. So I was like, whoa, I was pretty shocked, because I didn't know what happened. Was they gonna shut down the White House? I didn't know what was going on. So I was pretty shocked though.
So that was my next question for you. What were your emotional feelings? But you said you were shocked. You were astonished. And
I was like, I wasn't mad, but I questioned, like why go and and just storm the building like that. And some of my friends, like, it's people there, they get mad when they feel like um power has been taken away from you. Get what I'm saying? And that somebody else was being in office, and um they will also, I hear from different people, they'll say that by somebody else in the election, some people aren't, going to be able to do certain things, they could do while, Trump was in office. So, that's why some people, I feel like, they got mad and stormed the Capitol.
so I'm going to take what you said. You said when you said they get mad, some people get mad when they feel like power has been taken away from them. Your words actually mirror the words of one of our foot soldiers who is also on this panel, Dr. May Richmond. So what I just observed was two generations who lived in two. You were born in two different two different decades, but what you saw was you pull the same thing out of this moment. You both literally pull the same thing out of this moment. I had a different question, but when you said that, that hit me. You both literally pull the same thing out of this moment, and I think that's remarkable, because what it speaks to me, is the ideas that are often stated, that there's a big disconnect and a big disconnect in the way that our young people perceive the events of today, or that they're not able to think towards solutions to these issues. Or and I just want to call Alan right quick. Alan,
Okay.
I just want to ask you to kind of talk about real briefly, just kind of talk about because you're in between the age of Dr. Richmond and in between the age of Antoine. Antoine is a high school student. And so with you being in between their age, what do you have to say? Like, do you see any similarities between what happened then versus what happened back in 65, like Miss Richmond stated, like Antoine even stated he see a power struggle. And so are there any similarities to you? Do you see history even repeating itself? What do you see within that? Because you even touched on, I think you said it's amazing to you how white America tends to even get the benefit of the doubt sometimes.
Mhm.
And so is that something you see as repeating itself within our history? Because that even speaks to power. That's textbook white supremacy. When you start talking about one group being more powerful over the other, that's textbook definition of supremacy. So kind of elaborate on that, if you will, for us.
Well, let's be honest. I think Donald Trump, he did what Lyndon B. Johnson said. Lyndon B. Johnson said, if you got the worst white man and convincing he was better than the best black man, you wouldn't know he is picking your pockets and you'll give all his money. And see, that's what Trump did. What Trump did, he went, what Chestnut said, he went back and taught the language of pre-1960. And see, that put flesh on bones for these people to come out of nowhere and vote for him and put him in office. And he continued to raise them up and feed their spirit. And so what happened is 1960, again, the language of Donald Trump is 1950, 40, 30, pre-1960. So that, yeah, we seeing it again, just in a different time. So he did that. So those offsprings who their parents was able to speak those things into their life, they feel like they better than us. They deserve more than us. And this is why this generation is looking like their parents and their grandparents' generation, because of the leadership. When you take the leadership, the head, if you take the head, the body will follow. Because the leadership has went back to 1960 to speak their language. Now you're seeing that generation rise up again, and that's what it is.
Representative Chestnut, I want to call on you in this moment. What is your what is your response to what Alan just stated? He just brought out a point, and he brought a connection between even the language of the leadership and how what's being spoken today mirrors that dictative language of I'm better than you, or that language of control, that language. And he also hinted on how it's taught to children. So what is your response to that? What's going through your mind right now?
Yes, you know, when we look to elected officials, especially on the level of the president, we're looking for folks who inspire us, motivate us, make us, make us proud. And, if you look back in the 1980s, there was a guy named Ronald Reagan, and he kicked off his campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi. And for those who are on this phone, who are on this hearing, on this conference that know something about Philadelphia, Mississippi, it is a place that is very infamous in the civil rights movement. But when Ronald Reagan, who was also a person who was an actor, who was a celebrity, when he kicked off his campaign there, a signal was being sent. The signal was being sent. And likewise, when you had President Trump, and he surrounded himself with people like Steve Bannon, and the other gentleman that he had in the White House with him, who's known to be associated with white supremacists, a signal was also being sent. But not only was a signal being sent, but he's also able to get out and make very aggressive, bold statements. So what he did was he fed people's egos. He fed people's hate. He fed some people's desire to feel like they were getting one up, regardless of their situation, on folks that look like you and I. And I like to just add one other thing, that African Americans, we've been in this country for 400 years, and we have been treated worse than anybody else in this country. Yet, you've never heard of a true large group of African Americans getting together saying that we want to overthrow the federal government. Because even in spite of what we've been through, we are really and sincerely patriotic Americans.
Real quickly, before we move on, when you say we are patriotic Americans, I'm going to be honest, growing up, I never felt as though when I would hear the word patriot, I never felt like I was a patriot because of the definition of patriot that I was introduced to, that I knew based on my lived experiences. I felt like that didn't apply to me. So if you will kind of define to us, what is your, when you say patriotic Americans, kind of define that for us, just kind of give us a idea of what do you mean by that?
Well, like for instance, I've used some of the people that I've known in my family, and also friends and people that I've known over the years, folks who will join the military, go to a foreign country, fight wars against people that may have darker complexion, a complexion closer to ours, and fight to only to come back home and not be treated as equal, and to still love this country. I call that a patriot.
That's good. That's good. So let me ask you panel members a question. So everybody, I think we're kind of at a consensus. Everybody's talking about Donald Trump's role as the leader of the country and his impact on what transpired on January 6th. There's no doubt of what his role is and what it was in that moment. So do you feel that his presidency caused any trauma for America? Do you feel that his presidency caused any trauma for America? Do you even feel that, or even take it here, how did his presidency, the impact his presidency had on the Black community? Talk about, or even think about, were you surprised by any of the events that transpired during his presidency? Because some of you, I think, Antoine, you might have been the only one who really talked about your emotions were, you were shocked. That was your reaction. Everybody else was just kind of like, this is blatant white supremacy. This is people who feel like they lost their power. So our lived experiences, I believe, because of the age and the length of time and what they've gone through and what they've seen, I think impacted the difference within the response. So I really want you all to just kind of talk about, what do you feel that his presidency, and I think I already know the answer, but just kind of share with the listeners and the viewers, what type of trauma did that cause for America? And then take that into, what did it do to the Black community? Dr. Richmond, I think you're speaking, but we can't hear you.
Okay.
Okay, we hear you now. We hear you now.
Okay. In our reality, when a person show you who they are, believe them. He did not change, so to speak, his spots. Prior to doing his campaign, he belittled people. He showed his dictatorship. He let us know that once he was elected into that office, that he would continue in the manner in which he was conducting himself during his campaign. And he did just that. A portion of what we're dealing with is the fact that we, as African Americans, and we talk about voting and the importance of the African American or the black vote, because we did not exercise the right to vote, register, and vote, we allowed him to sit in that seat, to be elected to that seat. It's just like when you're playing a game, a basketball game or a football game, you can tell whether or not that person really truly wants to win that game. They give it their all in all. This person wanted that election, and he gave it his all in all by any means necessary. And he encouraged by any means necessary his followers. We saw this when he was on his TV show. He brought those same behaviors to the campaign and those same behaviors to the White House. And it's sad to say, but in this country, many people follow negative behavior. And 75, I guess somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 people followed that negative behavior. In order for us to have prevented that from happening again, we had to register to vote and exercise our right to vote. It's sad that we had to get to that point, but we did. And we do not need to be lax so it would not happen again. That's why people were able to gut, so to speak, in 2013, the Voting Rights Act, which they sit at their dining room table, they sit in their, what are those things called, the country clubs, and still make decisions as to how they plan to control and keep themselves in power and keep us legally in oppression.
Dr. Richmond, you right on target. You right on target. Making that connection. Go ahead, Representative. That's Antoine. Go ahead.
Yes, but I do agree with her also, because when he first started his campaign, yes, he did. He was making remarks that wasn't cool at all, and I do get what she's saying, because he literally showed them what type of person he is, and he didn't change. And what I want to say is, I don't think America was ready for the change of a woman being in charge of the United States, because they are rather for to let him be in office than to let Hillary or either any type of female be in the place of him. And so that's why I think most Americans voted him in office. Most people probably didn't want to vote him, but majority of those people did vote Trump into office, in which like many people knew how he acted, and I guess they was just like, hey, we're just gonna vote him in because we don't want Hillary in office. And so, and then he also affected, the black community was also affected, tremendously, because the stuff that he was doing, saying, that in some people's mind, we're just gonna say the people that were storming the Capitol, some people, the stuff that he was saying and the stuff that that they agree with, that was like ammunition for them to act the way that they was acting at the White House. If you get what I'm saying. And and it caused people that was already they already, let me see, how can I put this, I'm trying to see how can I put this, that was already I guess rattled about the campaign, and this just gave them, more time to just be like, hey, we just gonna storm the Capitol because we want him back in office, and just back to what I was saying, our situation is that they want that power. They don't want to let that power go, because he gave them like this, I guess, this sort of power because he agreed with, which wasn't right at all in my perspective.
I think if you look at the Black community, it hurt. Look at COVID. Look at his response to COVID. If you look at minorities, especially the Black community, underlying conditions, it hurt his leadership, his blatant lying about the COVID. It hurt our communities. COVID swept through our community like no other disease before. That hurt us. Now, what I did see an uptick of young Black Americans started to support each other in Black-owned businesses. I can say that because they saw that, man, this our president is kind of on the wild side. We got to support each other to get through that. So I did see that, but I saw our community really get down over COVID. A lot of people died unnecessarily behind the leadership of Donald Trump. Let's be honest. There was a hard hit to the Black community, the inner cities, like Atlanta, Selma, Detroit. It hit us bad. And like I say, by him blatantly lying, he did it on purpose. And so his leadership brought great trauma, but it also made people see, look, love your loved ones, as much as you can. Spend time with each other. You begin to value time with each other because you see that, look, some can sweep through real quick and change things. So that might be good in the long term. We might get back to what our communities used to be back in the day, loving on each other, helping each other out. That's a good thing that's coming out of this, but we lost a lot of loved ones unnecessarily through COVID-19. So the trauma that he put in this community, in the Black community, is great. It's on a great level.
I'm speechless because you all are really spot on. You're connecting the dots and you're making it plain. Let me ask a question about something that was said. When we talked about Ms. Richmond, in your wisdom, you said when people show you who they are, believe them. And it's funny how many times we've heard that phrase, or we say we know what that means, but what we just witnessed in these past 4 years was a real debate where we had a man who caused a group of people to question what they were hearing, what they were seeing. Clearly, you hear something. I think CNN had a commercial that said it had an apple and said, this is an apple. This is a banana. An apple looks like this. If you see an apple, they can't tell you it's a banana because the apple looks like this. And what we saw was a battle between, I think they started labeling it fake news, where we were questioning perception and people were really questioning, what am I hearing? Where a man would say one thing and people would say, you said this, and he'll say, no, I didn't. And a group of people really believe that. And I think what we're seeing is what we saw on January the 6th was as Malcolm X called it, the chickens coming home to roost. That's what we saw.
Right.
And so I think it's no secret that race played a factor in this. It's not a secret that race played a factor in this. And so with that being said, I want to ask you all a question. And it may be a tough one for some, but I do want to ask you, being that what we saw on January 6th, we saw a lot of violence, right? In them coming home to roost. We saw anger, we saw violence, we saw frustration. But yet they called it, I'm protesting. Walking through the Capitol with guns, walking through the Capitol making threats, walking through the Capitol while we were in session, handling government business, literally attempting to overthrow the government. That's textbook definition of treason. And so we saw this with our own eyes, but yet we haven't seen an honest response as we potentially, look at this, as we potentially would have seen. I'm going to be honest. I remember I went to Selma High School to pick up something. I saw the crowd. I left home. It takes 6 minutes to get somewhere in Selma. So only 6 minutes had passed My friend called me and she was yelling hysterically. I thought I was going to have to get in the car and drive to Birmingham. She said, no, get back home and watch these people walking in the Capitol like they live there and they're about to sit down and have breakfast. That's what we saw. So my question then becomes, and this is a question for you all. How is this even justifiable? Should violence be used to get our points across? And I want to even draw a connection here, and this may be a tough question for some. Should violence be used to get our points across? Because what we also saw was these people committed a blatant crime, and they called it protest. And believe it or not, they say that they're convictions and arrests, but what have we seen so far, right? And then there was even a hashtag going around social media, if they were black. And so kind of elaborate on that. Should violence be used to get our points across? And even if you think about and what's the difference between what happened on January 6th versus what happened in Birmingham versus what happened even in Selma? Because even in Selma, when there was violence, let me back up. Even in Selma, it wasn't until there was violence on the media when Dr. King actually picked up the phone and called Dr. Reese, and he answered the phone in the office and he said, "Brother Chairman, I see you have a problem." If I'm not mistaken, Alan, wasn't that the exact words in the conversation?
It was an understatement.
Yeah, that's exactly what his response. It was an understatement. We have a major problem here in Selma. So what we're seeing is and not even a generation. We're seeing in our history a repetitive result to violence, but we're seeing a difference in the responses. So kind of talk about that, if you will, and it doesn't matter who chimes in.
Well, look, let's be honest. America was built off violence. As the Boston Tea Party. Okay, now every time racist white people have tried to put fear in black people, they have used violence. Rosewood, Florida, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Charleston, South Carolina, New Orleans, Atlanta, 1919. We can go down the list. They have used violence to get their point across. But what Chestnut said, we are more patriotic. We tend to use the nonviolent approach because we want to sit at the table and let all of us eat from the pie. But what I've learned is that sometimes a little violence to show people that, look, I'm not playing with you, brings them to the table. Now, I know I come from a family that was nonviolent, and they were successful with nonviolent. But today, as young people, we tend to want these things to move a little quicker because we don't have 400 more years to get treated like equal citizens that we should. So I'm not the type of person to use violence, but I'm the type of person that'll love a person like Malcolm X behind me, who came to Selma in 1965, and he was coming to tell Dr. King that, look, I'm your brother and I got another method behind you if you need me. So I think sometimes when people see that, look, you got some people behind you that don't mind getting a little dirty, I think they tend to respect you more. That's just my opinion on it.
I'm laughing because I heard I immediately went to Dr. Reese's story where he was on the playground and somebody hit him and he didn't hit him back. And I remember my first time getting into an altercation and he was telling me I should have been I needed to be calm. And I'm like, no, Dr. Reese, we got to fight. And so I'm hearing you what you say, but I'm also really seeing and I know how you were raised. But nonetheless, I want to move to Representative Chestnut, if you will chime in right here.
Yes, and I like what Brother Reese just spoke about, because when he talked about Malcolm X being in Selma in '65, I actually I went back and did some due diligence on that perhaps a couple of years ago, and found that actually when Martin was in jail in Selma, Malcolm came down. The folks in Selma were a little rattled by the fact that Malcolm was here and that Malcolm was making statements that nonviolence would no longer be the order of the day. And as a result, subsequently, Martin was let out of jail. So I absolutely see his point there. And, you have to have something on the table that is a little more extreme sometimes in order to get, when you're reasonable and you're trying to negotiate in a reasonable manner, sometimes some folks, if they're dealing in bad faith, there has to be something else on the table. And it's the same way we do with diplomacy as a country. We have nuclear weapons. We don't have nuclear weapons just to have them. They're there to say, if all else fails, we got something else that we're willing to use. And so, absolutely, I understand that concept. And if you're negotiating and you don't have any kind of backup, now let me say this. I'm not saying you should go into a situation armed and to the teeth, ready to go to war and have carnage. War should be the last thing. But if someone is telling you that you should be stripped of your dignity, you should be stripped of your integrity, you should be divested of any rights as a human being, then at that point you have to make a decision that, do I want to live crawling on my knees, or do I want to die standing on my feet?
Wow, that's heavy. That's heavy. That's it. Ms. Richmond, are you speaking? I think you're trying to say something.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Go ahead.
As Representative Chestnut was speaking and was saying that we need something to go along with the nonviolence to help us to be able to get this situation resolved, it made me think about in 1965 when we were struggling for the right to vote. Our parents and aunts and uncles and what have you went down to the courthouse to register to vote, and the children stayed at the church. As a matter of fact, we had an opportunity to meet Malcolm X. And while at the church, Deputy Baker came in to tell Reverend Bevels, who was our Dr. King, that they were the people at the courthouse, the powers that be, so to speak, did not plan to register all of the African American or Black people standing in that line. They were going to cut it off and turn them around, send them home. So Reverend Bevels asked us to line up from a nonviolent perspective, to line up 2 by 2, and we will walk to the courthouse, not to sing, not to talk, just march. So we marched to the courthouse, and when we, as a matter of fact, Dr. King and Reverend Abernathy were in town that particular day. When we marched to the courthouse, the police officers were sitting on their motorcycles, very relaxed. But when we turned the corner to travel to the White House, travel to the courthouse, Reverend Bevel said to the law enforcement officer, "It's my understanding that you have no intentions of registering every Black person, Negro, standing in this line today. If you do not register them," he said, "though we are nonviolent, I will turn the children loose to travel throughout this entire courthouse." And they registered every African American person standing in that line that particular day. So I'm saying that to say this: there are ways and means through nonviolence to get tasks accomplished. We as an African American people, with the wisdom and knowledge that God has bestowed upon us, because when Jesus transitioned to heaven, he gave us the power, he sent it back to us. We're too divided. We have wisdom and knowledge that has been given to us by God that we need to sit in sessions and meetings and determine how we will take that power, because for us here on these American grounds now, that power is the vote. And we need to determine what we need to do in order to encourage our young people and our adults who are not registered to vote to register and to exercise that right to vote by attending the poll and voting for the person of their choice.
I'm so glad you are making a connection between what we're discussing and voting. And really voting is really the foundation of this. It's really it's really a I don't really want to probably say it this way, but it really is almost like the avenue toward our healing, toward our way out. And so I'm grateful that you're making this connection. And I'm even more grateful to hear it coming from you, a foot soldier, someone who was there during the struggle, during the fight, and even hearing you say you're connecting a situation that happened in 65 to what happened now. Because what I'm hearing is the solutions have already been presented. I think we just need more spaces like this so that we can talk and share and have students like Antoine at the table who are listening, who can hear what you have to say, hear those stories. And so that when it's time for them to get out into the front, they have direction, they have guidance, they have inspiration, and they have wisdom from which they've received from the elders. I'm so grateful for you today. I want to move into a different direction right before we wrap up. There was something that stuck out to me though on January 6th that I do want us to, I want you to kind of discuss for me. I don't know if you remember, but on January 6th, there was an individual in the crowd, out of the whole crowd, holding a sign. The sign said 2 words. It said, Jesus saves. Jesus saves. An individual was in the crowd holding a sign on January 6th, and the sign said, Jesus saves. And when I saw that, I had a reaction. And it's an interesting one. But I really want you to kind of go back to some of the things that you stated, and let's just connect this here. Because what we see a people who are angry, we see a people who are violent, and we've already connected that to the leadership of Donald Trump, right? And so I want you to even think about this and connect it here too. During his campaign, I even remember people in East Alabama rushing to him to sign their Bibles as though he's some sort of true representation of Christianity. And I don't know if you recall, but there was a moment when Donald Trump called himself reading a speech, and I think he said 2 Corinthians or something like that. And he said, well, this religious scholar, this theologian, this expert wrote this, so I just said what he wrote. And it's like, really? And not only did he do that, but remember, after that moment, he holds the Bible and he holds it upside down. And yet he has followers who are in the name, they are rioting, and they are obstructing our government, our nation's business in the name of Jesus. So if you will kind of delve into the hypocrisy that lies within what we're experiencing, because see, Henry Louis Gates just created this beautiful exposition of history of the Black church, connecting it all the way back to the African diaspora. So we as a nation, we've been exposed, and we're really, our minds are really and our eyes are open to the birth and the development of the Black church and the movement, and even the effects that white supremacy had on the Christian faith as we know it. And so what we see in 2021, what we saw in 2021 was still a group of people, the same group of people with the same way of thinking, standing in the crowd, still holding that Southern Christian belief, holding a sign saying Jesus saved. What are your thoughts on that?
Ooh, can I have a moment on this one?
Alan, I saw
I'm
you
sorry.
shaking,
I'm
Alan.
sorry.
I saw
Boy,
you
I'm so
shaking.
glad you brought this one up. Look, in history, you gotta understand what white people, what Jesus means to white people, right? Races, and what it means to black people is totally different. I gotta say this. Reverend Pastor Mayor James Perkins, his generations, they are coming obsolete because the interpretation, white people use the Bible to control. But when we begin to understand the interpretation of the word of God, we use it as power to get free. So what we understood is that, see, what Mayor and Pastor James Perkins understand, that you cannot be a man of God in the black community and not be a person in your community and hold some type of seat to be effective in the government, because white people, they didn't need the church to do what the church did for black people. The church made things open up for black people. You can go back to Reconstruction during that time. It was the church that was leading black people to the promised land. White folks had the government. So when you see, when they use Jesus saves, and they use the Jesus signs in the political movement, they're using it for control. And see, that's what we have to, that's the difference. Black people are using it for free. We understand the Spirit of God moves. We understand that, look, we can be free. We're going to use the word to speak life to situations, to make things happen for us so we can better ourselves. They use it, look, to keep these slaves, to control these slaves. Look at the Leonard letter. So that's the root of that. When you see that, that's the root of it. So it's the same play. It's the same play to say, look, this is what your Jesus wants. This is what Jesus, he wants Donald Trump in power. He's a man of God. That's what the slave masters did to the slaves. And we're not falling for it today. So I'm so glad you brought that up, Candace. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Anybody want to add to that? Alan, I'm over here yelling. I had to mute. I'm over here. You say it. So anybody want to add to that?
Sometimes we have to go through trials and tribulations to realize the blessings that we have before us. I was traveling one day and listening to a message on the radio, and the message was coming from the book of Habakkuk. And Habakkuk wanted to know from God, why am I having to continue with these people and these negative behaviors? And he said, I'm going to pour something out on them that like they've never seen before. And I said, oh my God, Trump will be the president of the United States. Like the Israelites, and we refer African Americans and the struggles that we've had much to the Israelites. We've left our first love. We've been disobedient to God. You've had more people who have visited the Word of God via a physical church or a parking lot service or internet or Facebook or what have you since the pandemic than we've probably had in the last 5 to 10 years, simply because we are going through a trial and a tribulation. And once we go through those, when all else fails, then we want to turn to God, who loves us and created us for Him, not for me. When we get to this point, God gave us, I think it's in 2 Chronicles 7:14, He gave us instructions. Give my people who are called by my name. He gave us instructions. And He told us if we be obedient to what it is that He was telling us to do, that He would heal our land, heal the land. We have not been obedient to those instructions. And we're still taunting with God. Each one of us sitting here on this panel have sense enough to know, and those who are listening, there is no one in this country that can touch the entire country at one time, at the same time, with the pandemic that we've dealt with in 2019. God knew about the pandemic before, and so did our political arena. However, because we as African American people sometimes do not sit at the table and get the appropriate information that we need, we seem to end up, as they say, on the short end of the stick. When we had the Hurricane Katrina, I was concerned after it was over, simply because the administration at the White House at that particular time, the government, was disconnected. One of the reasons why we suffered from Hurricane Katrina. In this country, in 2020-21, after Hurricane Katrina, during the pandemic, there is nowhere in this country that I'm aware of that we as an African American community, if a disaster hits our community, that we can pick up the phone and call north, south, east, or west and have someone to come to our rescue. There are other races of people in this country who have those type of resources available to them. What will it take for us to put those resources in place for us? If a pandemic or any other kind of tragedy hit right now, we as an African American community are the last people who receive benefits.
Wow, that's a powerful rhetorical question and segue to where we're going before we close. What will it take for us to get those resources as a people instead of waiting on someone to give it to us ourselves? That is the $1 million question. I want to actually push that over to Representative Chestnut, but I also want to ask you, in your response, will you also just answer this, especially because you're one of our community leaders, and personally, I, even admire your wisdom. And so I want to ask you a question. Since Selma rose to the occasion back in 1965, it's no secret of the impact of what happened in Selma, because if there was not an impact of what happened in Selma on the bridge in 1965, then we wouldn't even be having this conversation today on this platform. So since we rose to the occasion back in 1965, what can we do to rise to the occasion today? How can we help? How can we help with moving things forward? January 6th happened, and it was no secret to us who've been here. We weren't necessarily surprised, but yet we were still disturbed. So what can Selma do to help restore? What's our role in what's happening today? What is Selma's role? How can the Queen City of Selma contribute to the healing, to the progression, and to even the betterment of this nation, the unifying of this nation? What's our role? How can we contribute to that? And even kind of touch on what Ms. Richmond, her rhetorical question that she posed: what will it take for us to even go and get resources for ourselves? Just kind of talk about all of that, if you can tie it in together for us.
Gotcha. That's a lot, but I'll do my best. I believe that Selma has to do what I see happening now. I see now with with our mayor, with our council, with our county commission, and with the various instrumentalities of government, I see folks actually working together, right? And this is the first time I've seen this since I've been following government. Selma, we're at probably one of the best times we've been in as far as intergovernmental cooperation. Now, from there, I think that Selma has to, we have so many stories. We have so many treasures and jewels that still have not been unlocked and unleashed to the rest of the world. I think doing our due diligence and getting these stories and finding a way to get them out to the world is part of the process. I think that the Reese grandchildren have done a good job of getting the Ebenezer story out there. But we still don't have quite the story out on Tab, that needs to be out there. And LL Anderson and many of the other, the Courageous Eight. You talk to people outside of this community, they really don't know those stories, and they don't know what the people went through to get to where we are today. Now, as we kind of go into this area of how we as Black Americans find ourselves growing into what we should be. We as Black Americans, I want to say this: we saved this country this past November, because if Black Americans did not show up to the polls, Donald Trump would still be the president. And I don't know if the country could have took another 4 years of Trump there, because if you watch what was going on, I told people in year 1.5 of Trump's reign, I told friends of mine, I said, if we're not careful, this guy will become another Benito Mussolini or possibly Adolf Hitler, because he had that kind of pull. I've never seen a person who was president who had that kind of power in the United States. Third world countries, yes. United States, no. But he started getting power with the military. He started consolidating that power. He started giving all these shouts out to police and paramilitary. He was doing some of the same things that dictators do all over the world. He was consolidating power. He was letting the people with the guns and the military might know, I'm with you. As long as you do what I ask you to do, you're good. And as he was defeating the impeachment process, it made him even stronger. So if Black America did not step up, we're not talking about all these other people. We're talking about Black America. If Black America does not go all in for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, we're looking at a completely different America. Now, I say that to say this, that as Black Americans, we have always went out of our way to save the country. Now it is time for us to have the country to help save us. And part of that process is economic empowerment. And we as Americans, we have to start looking at entrepreneurship. We have to start looking at opening our businesses. We have to start looking at let's go work for somebody for a while, but let's learn what we need to learn, and let's invest in ourselves, create businesses, and support our businesses. Because if we do that and the dollars turn over 7 times in our community, then we have made a true and sincere impact. And we have to go to government and say, we want not all these other different minority groups, but Black Americans, that we need economic empowerment. We need money set aside so that we can start our businesses, so that we can help create wealth and generate wealth within our own communities.
Wow. That's it. That's key. 2 things before you wrap up. One thing that Representative Chestnut said that I thought was remarkable. You mentioned Reverend Lewis Lord Anderson and the Tabernacle story. I was telling a friend about that story today as I was watching the bridge crossing. And I am blessed to have been born during a time where I'm a millennial, but yet I got a chance to meet Reverend Anderson. I took piano lessons at his house, and I was telling one of my friends how the one memory that and the one moment that will always stick out was when I left my music books, and I was 7 years old, and Miss Anderson told him, "This is Reverend Pettaway's granddaughter, and she doesn't have her music books." And Miss Anderson used to pop you on your knuckles when you mess up. So I was nervous. I thought I was gonna get a spanking with the stick. And Reverend Anderson pulled me out of the room. He said, "Come here." And during that time when older people speak to you, you fall in submission. And he said to me, he said, "Let me tell you something. Why don't you have your books?" I said, "I forgot them." He said, "Old people forget. Young people don't forget." He said, "You are young and you have so much ahead of you. And I need you to always be prepared." And that stuck with me to this day. That tabernacle story and all of these stories are so powerful. And yes, it is time for economic empowerment for our people. And it's time for us to go and get that which is ours. And we can't wait. Sit back and wait for someone to get it to us. It's our time. This is definitely our time. Antoine, we're going to wrap this up. And if you will, just real briefly, give us your your final thoughts, final remarks, if you will. We're going to shoot to Antoine, and then we'll shoot to Dr. Richmond, and then we'll close out with Alan in that order.
I just will say I'm thankful to be a part of this panel tonight with all our well, we have a foot soldier right on the panel today, our panelists.
Yes.
It's great to hear those stories. Also, information that I need to hear, to pass on to my peers, and also pass on to, a next generation that's coming, and also having that knowledge, this knowledge that, that y'all are sharing with me also, so I can have more, knowledge and, self-awareness about what's going on, what's been going on. And, it's good that you brought some of those questions and, some of those questions to the light, that I truly have more, insight on. And I think is that Mr. Reese that was speaking, the stories that he was explaining about. I thank you for those stories. That you're telling, not stories, but the information that you was giving. And I just thank, for being a part of this panel tonight. And I thank everybody for logging on tonight.
Hold on, Alan, before you come, Antoine, I just want to quickly say, as a young person, I want to thank you. You thanked everybody else for sharing the stories with you, but you shared your perspective with us. You were a critical part in tonight's discussion. Your voice matters, and your voice mattered. And so we appreciate you, and we appreciate your place, and we appreciate you for sharing your voice. And this is only the beginning for you. You keep speaking. You keep sitting at the feet of your elders. Learn all you can. Gather all the wisdom. And I promise you, doors will open for you. You will find yourself being on the front lines of the change that's going to be and that we will see in this world. And I just had to deposit that in you. I'm sorry. That just came to me really quickly when you were speaking and you were thanking everybody. And I'm like, let me thank him. So I just had to do that. Alan, it's on you.
Can you hear me? Thank you for allowing me to be on this panel. My closing statements would be, I want all my young people to start getting along. If you're not here on this earth, we can't use you for change. I would say curriculum. I would love to see the curriculum. I love the curriculum on voting. It's time for the Black community to put the curriculum out there about Black Wall Street, Rosewood, our communities that were successful Black communities, and really put emphasis how those communities was run. Like, I got to go back to what Prince Chestnut said, man. Economic. When you have money and resources, is where your power is, and we have to put emphasis on that in our community to be successful. That has to happen. How do you do that? You teach it. How do you teach it? You have to demand it's a part of the curriculum. Our young people need to see their ancestors, how great they were. And it's time for that. Let's start from the bottom and we can work on the top and we can meet in the middle. So I thank you for this time and hold your elected officials accountable too. Just don't vote and go away. Vote and stand on them strong. Change your curriculum. Be a part of your school board meetings. It's a lot that you can do to change your community that makes the community work. So I appreciate the time. I love you. Thank you.
Thank you for an opportunity to serve and including me in this evening's meeting on this panel. We need our young people. Our young people, we need you to pick up the baton and continue a positive struggle for change. As Representative Chestnut, we want to please, and Mayor Perkins, Reverend Perkins, add to that list of economic power, also home ownership. We need to own our homes instead of renting. Education is the key out of poverty and the pathway to an abundant life. We need to know our history. We need to teach our history to our children. We need history, African American, Black history in our schools, but we need to begin at home, teaching it at home, teaching it in our churches to our children, their value and their worth. We need to begin to prepare, starting today, for this next presidential election, because we don't have 2.5 to 3 years to try to get ready for it. We need to begin preparing now. So I want to leave this with our panel, with our representatives from the Free Thinkers tonight. We need to work together in unity, beginning tonight. We have city, county, state, and federal administration that looks like us. As you forestated, this is our time. We need to take that opportunity and use it to the glory and the honor of God for our benefit. Have a good evening.
With that being said, we want to thank everyone for viewing into the Courageous Free Thinkers Forum, which was sponsored by the Selma Dallas County, Friends of the National Historic Trail. We are grateful for this opportunity. I am grateful for the opportunity to serve tonight, and I'm grateful for more so grateful for the opportunity to share the stage and to sit at the feet of the wisdom, the intergenerational wisdom that was represented on this panel. This panel to me tonight is the epitome of why it is important to have representation, intergenerational representation at the table. And this is why it's important to have these conversations. So my challenge to everyone, do not let the conversation stop here. There was a lot discussed tonight, a lot presented. So if you will, I challenge everyone who hears this now, who may hear this later, I challenge you to continue this conversation with your family. Share the video, start the conversations, start talking about our history, make the connections between what we've experienced before January 6th and what happened on January 6th, and the role that voting will play in moving us forward from what we went through these last 4 years. And I challenge you to continue these conversations, and from there, start talking about economic empowerment. Look at ways that we as a people can rise, home ownership, property ownership, how we can develop the new Black Wall Street, It is within us. We have the power. The foundation has been laid. We have the power. The time is now. We are the change that we want to see. So the time is now. Don't wait. Don't wait. We've waited for too long. The time is now. And I am here in the struggle, in the fight with you. I support you and I love you. And I pray that everyone has an amazing night. And also, don't forget to tune in the morning to the Courageous Free Thinkers worship service that will be streamed live on this same platform in the morning, I believe at 10:30. So if you will tune in, it will be streamed live in the morning from this same page, same platform. Everyone have a good night and be blessed. Thank you.